Hey guys, it's Karina here with another video. So today I have a guest on my show. This is my brother Luke, and he's going to be sharing his journey with mental health today. So I'm just going to ask him some questions and we hope you guys enjoy this video. So the first question is, Luke, what has your journey been with mental health?
Well, it all started when I was 8 years old. I was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactive disorder, and I started medication. And then I was well for a couple of years until I was 13. I was diagnosed with suspected bipolar because of some unusual thoughts and behaviors that they had been observing. And then I was well for another couple of years until I was 15. I had a manic episode that started with psychosis and an entry into hospital, where I spent 63 days in hospital and spent a lot of the time out of touch with reality. Then I went on to do well in high school and make it to college. And after my first month in college, the stress and distractions overstimulated me, and I became manic again and lost touch with reality for a couple months. And then I was admitted into Homewood for a couple weeks with acute care, and I then was released and was referred back to come to the CPC program at Homewood.
Alright, so what has been the most challenging part of your disorder and how have you overcome that?
The most challenging part of my disorder has been really the losing touch with reality, as you often become someone you're not and become obsessed with things you're not normally obsessed with, and it can be really damaging. And it wasn't until I got to Homewood that I really became able to accept those things through the skill they call radical acceptance, which is basically a skill where you repeat what you experience, let all the emotions and body sensations come in. You don't pass judgments or opinions, and at the end you remind yourself that there's a life worth living even with pain, regret, or embarrassment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that goes for anyone. Like, we all just need to radically accept ourselves. Alright, Luke, can you describe in more depth what was your program about and what was the purpose of it?
So the program was called the CPC program, the Comprehensive Psychiatric Care. Essentially, the idea of the program is that they teach you CBT and DBT, which is cognitive behavior therapy and dialectical behavior therapy, while offering lots of supports like nurses, psychiatrists, recreational therapists, occupational therapists, music therapists, and all kinds of supports and staff to make sure your journey and your stay is therapeutic.
Oh, so it sounds like you have a lot of support there. Alright, so what was the most challenging thing you experienced while in hospital?
The most challenging thing I experienced was sometimes hearing other people's stories, and also not getting to choose who you hang out with. Not saying that the people there weren't always great, but it is nice to choose who you get to hang out with.
Yeah. So that was probably good life skills too, just to learn how to get along with people you don't always agree with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Alright, so the next question is, what did you enjoy about your hospital experience?
I really enjoyed all the alternative activities they offered, which included morning walks, the horticultural therapy, the ceramics, and all of the creative arts and just the different therapies. Oh, and music therapy.
Nice. Sounds like they have a lot of different options for you guys. All right. So explain 5 of the most useful tools you learned while in hospital.
Well, the first tool that I learned was the scale, which essentially is the tool you use to figure out what you're going to do with your current state. And it's basically the idea is that if you're at a 70 to 100, you're in distress tolerance, and your goal is to make sure things don't get worse. And if you're below 70 to 100, your goal is to regulate your emotions and problem solve.
And the second thing?
It is the concept of wise mind, which essentially is this idea that your brain has emotions, and it also has logical thoughts and reasoning. And it is neither good to be just in one or the other, but best to be in a combination of the two, where you can use your emotions that lead you to observations and insights, and your rational thinking to make the most wise decision possible.
Number 3?
This was a skill that I learned near the end of my program that I found very helpful, and it's called the Mindfulness Describe skill, where essentially you observe what's going on within you, your thoughts are around you, and you take the attachment away from them by describing them as like, I had a thought that I'm stupid, rather than just saying I'm stupid. And essentially what that does is it takes away the emotional attachment to things. And it could go for like looking at something and saying, this room looks awful, or then saying, I had a thought, this room looks awful. And it really allows you to be in control of what you want to do with that.
All right, number 4?
Number 4 was the distress tolerance skill, self-soothe. And now a lot of people at the hospital when I was there, including myself, didn't realize as an adult that self-soothe can be an effective skill. They often babies naturally will do this with what are those things?
Suckers?
Yeah,
Or
suckers.
Soothers?
To soothe themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And the self-soothe, the stress tolerance skill is basically looking at visual, hearing, smell, taste, and feel. And there's a lot of cool things you can do with visual, like you can look up a YouTube video of a starry night, or some waves going, or you can look at something you've made. And with the hearing one, you can listen to a lot of songs or different sounds, like rain or something. Or you can even just strum along to an instrument that you have, and just listen to the simple strumming of the instrument.
Nice. And number 5?
So number 5 is one that is really useful when you're really distressed. Starting with it's called the tip skill. It's T for temperature, where you can use either hot or cold and put it on a place of stress, or put something cold right on your face, and that's called the dive technique, where your body has a response when you put something cold on your forehead. Your heart rate drops. And then you can also do intense exercise, which is one of my favorites for high distress. I like to do what they call sprints, and essentially what you do is you go outside, sprint as hard as you can, and then catch your breath, and then do it again, and keep doing that until you cleared your mind. And it can be really effective because it's really hard to think when you're sprinting as hard as you can.
Yeah.
Trust me, I've tried. And then the other ones are paced breathing, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with, where you slow down your breath. I could go through the techniques, but there's too many to count. And then paired muscle relaxation, which is where you tense up your muscles as hard as you can, and then you release that tension. And for some people, this can be very effective, and some people it can just make them feel more tense. But that's why it's important. Something I learned throughout the hospital time is that there's a lot of skills that they teach you. Some of them you'll never use at all, and some of them you're going to be using close to every day.
Mm-hmm. And these sound like really helpful skills for anyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are types of things anyone can use in their daily lives to control their emotions, right? All right, so what would you say you learned about mindfulness?
What I learned about mindfulness is that it's more than just a state of like meditation. That it's actually a state of just being in that wise mind, like I talked about earlier. Being in that state where you're in the moment, you're attentive to what's going on, and you're using your senses, and really just being in tune with your body sensations and emotions and what's going on with you at the time. Now, mindfulness is a really important skill for mental health, because if you're not mindful of your state, then you can't really assess what your mood is, and you can't really make any decisions on what you're going to do with your emotions. If you're not aware that your heart is beating really fast and you're really stressed out, then you're not going to be able to use a distress tolerance skill to help you with that.
Yeah. All right. So, what was your biggest takeaway from being in hospital?
My biggest takeaway from being in this hospital program was that I don't know the exact numbers I would put on this, but that medication is like 30% of the work, and 70% of the work is just doing everything you can to help your mental state, keeping track on your sleep, and using all these skills every day. And saying all that, I don't mean to say that medication is not a part of your mental health. If you're not on the right medication, or if the medication is not the right dose, definitely look at that. But what I learned is that medication is not the only way to help control the uncontrollable beast of mental health.
All right. Question number 9. So, if you were in a state and you were becoming unwell, what would your plan of action be?
So that's where we look at a safety plan, which I happen to have with me here. And really a good start is to know what your triggers are. And triggers can be statements, they can be situations, or reoccurring kind of like reoccurring events. So that these things could be things that are said, situations, or like things like that that may be coming, or like deaths or something like that. You know that those things can be challenging or can really affect your mental health. I think we all know that when people die, that can really have an effect on our mental health, but it's good to be prepared for the unexpected. Mm-hmm. That's just an example. And then it's good to know the warning signs. And a lot of people, when they spiral out of control with their mental health, they spiral very similarly each time. So if you are aware that when winter comes and you can't move around for months, you become very depressed, then you know that next winter I'm going to make sure I get a gym membership and fight that. And things like that. And then knowing your coping strategies, which is all the tools that we listed here, or you can look up more tools online, as DBT and CBT are more than just what is taught in hospital. It's available. There's books on it. There's online websites on it. There's videos on it. Just look up DBT or CBT and you'll find it.
Quickly define DBT and CBT.
Oh, so DBT is also known as dialectical behavior therapy, and it's basically looking at two things that seem opposing but are actually true. Like, for example, I love you, Karina, but I'm really angry with you. Right? Those things seem opposing, but those things could both be true.
Right.
And that's kind of how emotions work, right? Your emotions and your thoughts are often not in tandem, but can both be true at the same time and valid in their own ways. And dialectical behavior therapy is about kind of looking into your thoughts and emotions and figuring out how they connect and all that. And then there's CBT, which is the connections between your thoughts, body sensations, and your emotions, and figuring out how those in that triangle all flow. And then it's also really important to, if you're someone who's starting to struggle with their mental health, to know what your supports are. And it's also really important to pick good supports. So you want to pick a friend that knows you really well and doesn't pass judgments and is more of a listener than a, like, you want them to be able to give advice, but you want them to be a good listener. It's also good to have family members that you trust, or people in position to help you, like counselors or pastors, or even prayer lines, or Here 24/7. And then it's good to let people know what things they can do to help you, if you know certain things are helpful. But it's also good to let them know what things are not helpful. So if there's things that people have done in the past, which I think we've all experienced, where someone tried to comfort you and really they just made things a million times worse. It's good to let people know that that's not helpful, so that you can get the therapy that you need.
So what would your advice be to anyone struggling with their mental health?
My first piece of advice to anyone struggling with mental health is to make sure there's somebody watching over you, whether that's a family member, a friend, or someone to make sure that you're keeping on with your sleep and your medication, and really making sure that you're being appropriate on social media, and just in all socializing, because when you're not well, it can often be detrimental to your social life and to how people see you. So it's good to have someone watching over you. And then I would also say, just look over your sleep, your medication, talk to your psychiatrist, and try to be as mindful as possible.
So I hope this video was encouraging for you guys, and I hope you learned something. Please know that if you are struggling, you are not alone, and please call a helpline. I will link it in the description box below. I hope you guys have a great week and stay healthy with the coronavirus and everything, and know that if God puts you to it, He will put you through it. Alright, bye guys!